Many retirees cling to their principal out of fear.
But that fear could quietly steal their best years.
For many people in retirement, fear isn't just about market volatility.
It's about running out of money.
Here in a moment, we're going to talk about where the idea of never touching principal actually came from, why it creates stress for so many retirees, and how to think about your nest egg a little more realistically.
Today, we're walking through why this mindset became popular, why it often doesn't work anymore, and what a healthier approach to retirement income looks like. Eddie, why does the idea of never touching the principal sound amazing?
Well, sounds great because you don't have to worry about market volatility. You don't have to worry about your portfolio going up and down in price. You never have to sell anything. You just kind of live on the interest and the dividends that come into your portfolio or interest in your bank account or something like that. It sounds great on paper, but where the idea had formulated from, where it came from, was because the number one fear in retirement is retirees running out of money. And so what increases the risk of someone running out of money? Well, if the portfolio is swinging up or down, we know we don't want to sell at a low, and we don't want to take money out when the market's down, or we get scared about those kind of things, not having a plan to do so. And so that stress and that anxiety around that says, well, if I can just live on the dividends and interest and never have to sell, that's going to be a good thing.
But when the fear of running out of money becomes unhealthy, it can lead to stress, to anxiety, even an unhealthy quality of life.
Yeah, people will sit there and delay things because of it. Like they start getting anxious about the market, and all of a sudden they want to put off a medical procedure. Or they want to put off some major purchase that they really need or something like that. Like think of a dishwasher or an air conditioner or something. They'll live in misery sometimes out of the fear that I can't spend too much because, again, they don't have a plan on how to spend their money.
Yeah, so can you give us an example maybe of where you've seen this take place in real life?
A few years ago, I had a client that was sitting across from me, and they were talking about they had some extra cash in the bank, wanted to know what to do with it. And we cover this in other videos, but we have a certain amount that we want for emergency funds, for big emergencies, things like that. Then life can happen, all that kind of stuff. And so we were walking through that, and turns out they had way more than that, about 2 or 3 times more than what they needed in there. And on top of that, find out that they have about $60,000 in the safe at home. So we got to talking about the stress and anxiety. They're worried about running out. They're worried about market volatility. And so we walked through the reasons why we don't want that much money in the bank or sitting at home. If somebody breaks into your house, that's going to be a problem. But anyway, so having the appropriate amount, and then talking about how they're not even withdrawing from their portfolio right now. They don't even need the money in their portfolio right now. And yet they have all this money in the bank, and yet they have all this money in the safe. Come to find out, she was from parents of the Great Depression, right? Very frugal people, very worried about money because of what they had to go through the stock market crash, Great Depression, all this kind of stuff. And we went through and talked about and eased that anxiety a little bit of, hey, you've got some money to spend. It's okay to spend a little bit of money. You worked for it. If you don't spend it, someone else is going to spend it later. So why do you put yourself through certain things? She starts crying. I just needed someone to tell me this. She has a granddaughter that wanted to ask if she could donate $100 to her organization at school, the granddaughter's organization at school that she's a part of. And she didn't even know if she had the $100 to give her.
Wow.
So she was crying just because of the relief of stress, because she didn't realize she had enough.
Yeah, so just to be clear, we're not saying spend recklessly.
No. This is where having a plan really matters.
So this idea of don't touch the principal, it didn't come out of nowhere. So where did it come from?
Well, as far as we can tell, originally in the 17 or 1800s, very, very wealthy Europeans had this concept of just living on interest. So they would invest in things like bonds, bank accounts that paid a decent interest, and they had so much money and wealth that they would just live on the interest that came in from that stuff without ever like going into the bank and pulling out extra money from the corpus. And then you had a bunch of trust laws that were passed later on that reinforced this idea of not touching the principal or the corpus of a portfolio, only living on the interest. It would instruct the trustees to do that.
Yeah, there are some universities like Yale, Rice, Harvard have big endowments, and they kind of live off of this principle.
Right. And you got to remember those types of entities, at least by law, they don't go out of existence. They go on into perpetuity. We're finite beings. We have a life expectancy. Problem is we don't know when that is,
right.
But we have a life expectancy. Over time, this philosophy of don't touch the principal, it became popularized through some financial books, personal financial books, different programs and such, and everyone's got their own spin on it. But that's where it really became part of the mainstream or thought process of retirees.
So here's the question then. Is this actually practical for most people?
Well, maybe. I mean, for most people, the math just doesn't add up.
Right.
So let's just be generous and assume a 2.5% average inflation rate year over year.
Right. So and inflation just means the price of goods and services keeps going up.
Right. And so if you have a bank account that's paying you 3%, a generous 3%, if it's paying you 3% and inflation's 2.5%, you're basically going to net about 0.5%. So if you needed $50,000 a year to live on annually, and that need was going to go up with inflation every year as well, we know that. But if you needed $50,000 a year annually to get that 0.5% that you need because you don't want to touch the principal, you're going to get the 2.5%. You got to account for inflation because your need goes up every year. You're going to need $10 million in the bank to make that happen. And let's just get real. I mean, most people don't have $10 million.
Plus interest rates, they don't stay the same.
Right. The Federal Reserve's always adjusting rates up or down depending on how the economy's doing. And so why does that matter? Well, when interest rates go up, bank accounts tend to pay you more. Let's say inflation was 2.5%. You would think, well, if they raise interest rates, now I can take more. Well, more than likely, if the Fed's adjusting interest rates up, they're trying to slow the economy down. Maybe inflation's higher. That's what just happened a few years ago. Yeah, bank accounts started paying like 5% on CDs or something like that. But inflation was 9% at the height, right? So you're still upside down on that math. That rate that you get paid in the bank very rarely ever keeps up with inflation in the long term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when that idea of don't touch the principal came into fad, when it started bleeding over into personal finance, back in those days, people didn't live as long on average as they do now.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that makes a big difference because you don't need as much money for that corpus to last.
So how should we view a retirement nest egg?
This is where mindset matters. We don't invest because we enjoy the markets going up and down. We invest because we want to keep up with the cost of living, not because we enjoy the markets or our portfolio going up or down. Eddie Arnold is going to take the path of least resistance to get from point A to point B. That doesn't mean that I'm a conservative investor. I'm a conservative planner. So what's the difference? Well, I can have conservative estimates on what inflation rates are going to be, what life expectancies, looking at different outcomes, the probabilities around that stuff. But as a conservative planner, I don't want to use all the resources that I have available today to save for a tomorrow that may or may not be there. And so there's a trade-off, a blend. And so because of that, because I'm not going to allocate all my resources, I have a family, got kids, we go travel, we do things together, we got to eat. So instead of allocating all those resources tomorrow, that means I have to take more risk with the amount I am going to use for later on so it can grow more over the allotted amount of time.
And so we should rethink this never touch the principal idea and really conceptualize it as, how can I make this money last the rest of my lifetime?
Right. Or at least, how can I make this money go down slower in a portfolio than it would if I buried it in the backyard or stuck it in the bank? Mm-hmm. The goal isn't perfection, it's sustainability.
So let's talk about the role of a plan. How does financial planning help to address this issue?
Well, a solid financial plan is going to account for things like market volatility, inflation. Oh, by the way, other goals that you have set for your life.
Unexpected costs.
Correct. And so there are tools that there's some available online, right? But some of it's the skill set needed of how to read the tools. So for example, they have a software that does Monte Carlo analysis. So it sounds like gambling, but it's not. Monte Carlo was the gentleman that came up with the math that the software is based on. Actually, it's the same software they use for weather forecasting. So when they're doing hurricane forecasts and that cone of uncertainty that you see, it's the same math. It's just using financial data instead of weather data. And so we use tools like that to project out, okay, what are the probabilities of success if somebody makes this decision or this decision? Now, where that can get scary is some people look at that and they say, well, I'm certain I'm going to die at age 80, or I'm certain I'm going to live to 100. And you try to make the math saying, oh, I've got to be 100% sure that's going to work out. Well, there's a lot of other factors to take into consideration. Right. None of that stuff's written in stone. It's probabilities, not certainties. And so there's certain probabilities we like to see when it comes to certain ages on that thing. So in other words, we don't have to be as sure that you and a spouse are going to make it to age 95 as we do age 80, right? Two different things. So we want to see two different probabilities around those numbers.
So a plan gives you permission to enjoy your retirement without guessing.
Yeah. And it helps you make decisions without letting fear dictate those decisions for you. You have math around it. Math's a lot more finite, even though we're dealing with variable math, right? That's a lot more finite than our feelings. Our feelings tend to go towards worst case scenarios. Oh my gosh, this happened to dad, so it's going to happen to me, or it didn't happen to dad, so it's not going to happen to me. Those kind of things drive our emotional, and that is what dictates a lot of the fear and greed and things that we have going on that are pretty flawed most of the time. Whereas the math, it just says, here's what the probability might be.
So the role of a financial plan is it's not just about preserving money, it's about living your life. So money should be looked at simply as a tool to help you live.
Never touching principle sounds safe, but for many people, it just creates unnecessary stress.
A thoughtful plan can help balance longevity, income, and quality of life.
If you're ready to rethink your retirement and what's best for your situation, talk to a professional you can trust.
If this episode helped you to see retirement differently, share it with someone who might be holding on to fear instead of having a plan.